if God is so good, then why did he send the flood? That's a really tough question to answer, even for top Christian scholars, but I think in this video I can simplify the way that we understand the flood, at least a little bit. In order to answer this question, there's a couple of unwritten factors that we need to address before we can even begin to approach the question. The first thing that we need to address is that this is not the only judgment scene in the Bible. There's a whole motif all throughout the Bible of judgment over and over and over again. This includes things like the flood, but also the exodus of the Israelites leaving Egypt. This also includes the conquest of Joshua and the Israelites going into the Promised Land. The exile fits under this category, right? God is sending judgment on Israel. And ultimately, we look forward as Christians to the end of time, when Jesus comes back, and that is described in terms of like Noah and the flood, Sodom and Gomorrah, judgment. Jesus is coming back to judge the world for evil, for wickedness, and for sin. Okay, so that's the first thing. This is not the only judgment motif in the entire Bible. Another factor that we need to cover is we as Americans are in a very unique position. For most of human history, the vast majority of people, have lived under violent subjugation by oppressive empires from the outside. Right? Think about it. The Roman Empire took over the whole world, and the Romans were sitting pretty, but Israel was under occupation. And the same thing with the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire. When you live in a land where your life can be taken at any moment, when your possessions can be taken at any moment, where injustice can happen to you and you have nothing to do about it, that is just not a reality that you and I understand. It's helpless and powerless and terrifying that everything you know and love can be obliterated in a moment, and often was. Many people were oppressed just because they were weaker. Let's tax them like crazy. Let's take their stuff. Let's kill anybody who wants to disagree with us. The injustice in the world for millennia has been rampant, and that's just something that we don't understand. When the Bible talks about something like the conquest with Joshua and the Israelites going into the Promised Land, taking over the Canaanites, the Bible describes the Canaanites as violent people, as idolatrous people, in unjust towards women, unjust towards slaves, unjust towards children even, sacrificing them in the fire. There's a lot that the Bible has to say about the Canaanites. And in fact, it's not just rhetoric either. The Bible also has the same things to say about Israel at the time of the exile, right? Israel was idolatrous, murderous, unjust towards women. All these violent crimes, both Joshua in the conquest of Canaan and God sending Israel into exile, the people of ancient times would have read these stories and understood exactly what God was doing. Because when you have an oppressive empire like that, and you have no power, what do? But when they see God overthrowing these oppressive empires, they see the goodness of God in the judgment itself. We don't see that because we're not used to that dynamic. But God's goodness brings about judgment. So when we come back to the flood story, we see exactly the same thing. It says the whole earth was filled with violence, and people's thoughts were only wicked all the time. And so God had to bring justice. How many more people have to be murdered before God does something to bring justice? How many more people have to be enslaved before God does something? These people cannot stand up for themselves. God has to do it for them. So that's his big goal. Now, there's another factor that we need to consider, and that is the rescue motif. Every single judgment in the Bible that you see, there's always a remnant who is rescued out of the judgment. Some people who are a part of that wicked group, but they're not wicked themselves. And so God pulls them out of their wicked neighbors and saves them from the judgment. So in the story of the flood, we have Noah and the ark. Now, it doesn't say this directly in the story, but later in other traditions, and I think the New Testament as well, if I'm remembering correctly, but correct me on that if I'm wrong. But there was this idea that Noah would have been proclaiming salvation to his neighbors, like, hey, there's a flood coming, repent, come on the ark, and you will be saved. It's not in the flood story, but I can't remember which tradition I read about that. But there is a remnant from the flood who is saved. The righteous are saved from the flood through the ark. In the conquest, Joshua in the conquest, there's Rahab. Not all the Canaanites were killed. Everybody who repented of their wicked works became a part of Israel. So we can truly say that Canaan was destroyed. But that doesn't mean every single human died. Rahab lived and became a part of Israel. That was part of the deal. In the Exodus, God sends judgment on Egypt and sends salvation for Israel. But that doesn't mean every Egyptian was killed. I mean, the Passover was offered to everybody in Egypt, and everybody who heeded God's warning took the Passover lamb and put the blood on the doorpost, and they were saved, right? And there's a lot of Egyptians who came out of Egypt with Israel, right? So it's not as simple as God is attacking these people and saving these people. It's God is judging wickedness and saving the oppressed. In the exile, Israel was the one under judgment, but Jeremiah, an Israelite, no doubt, but he was saved from wicked Israel. He was not slaughtered like so many of the Israelites. In fact, even when he told people by the word of the Lord, you should not go down to Egypt to escape this judgment. This judgment will overtake you in Egypt. Some people decided, no, we're going to disobey God and we're going to go to Egypt. Anyways, they kidnapped Jeremiah and took him with them. Then when Babylon came to exercise that judgment, then Jeremiah still made it through unscathed, whereas the wicked people perished. And this is how it's going to be at the end of time, right? Jesus is coming back to judge sin and wickedness. He's going to get rid of everything satanic, everything murderous, everything immoral, everything that's oppressive. He's going to rescue the oppressed from the oppressor. And for those of us who don't want to be included among the sinful, there is a way through. The gospel is our ark of salvation for surviving the floods of our day. So, this is not an easy question. I don't pretend to have encapsulated the entire issue in 8 short minutes, but I hope this helps you understand that God is not out to murder people. He is not judging people because he hates people. He's judging people because he loves people. And that's why God sent the flood.